Welcome to another thrilling episode on our channel. Today, we dive into the dramatic unfolding of the Attorney General flight drama, a gripping tale of power, scandal, and high-stakes decisions at 30,000 feet. What happens when the nation's top legal officer faces an unexpected twist in the skies? Stay tuned as we unravel the mystery, uncover hidden motives, and explore how this incredible story became a headline sensation. Don't miss out on captivating stories like this. Hit subscribe and press the bell icon to stay updated with our latest content. Your support keeps us bringing you the most intriguing tales. The first-class cabin hummed with quiet luxury. Crystal glasses tinkled gently, and the soft rustle of newspapers and conversations filled the air. Camille Jenkins, the newly appointed Attorney General, adjusted her sleek, tailored blazer and settled into her seat. Her flawless complexion gleamed under the cabin's warm lighting, and her natural curls framed her face with an elegance that demanded attention. Yet, Camille preferred her presence to speak louder than her title. She was not a woman who flaunted her power, she simply carried it. As the flight attendants began their rounds, Camille reached for the novel in her lap, ready to immerse herself in the rare downtime. But her moment of calm was cut short when a middle-aged man in the seat next to her turned and gave her a once-over. His lips curled into a smirk. "Excuse me, miss," he said, leaning in with an air of condescension. "I think you are in the wrong seat." Camille's brows knitted briefly before she regained her composure. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be," she replied, her voice measured. The man chuckled dryly, shaking his head. "First class isn't for everyone, you know. Did you wander up here by mistake?" Camille held his gaze, her deep brown eyes unwavering. "Sir, I assure you I am in the right place." Before the man could respond, a flight attendant approached. The blonde woman, clad in a crisp uniform, offered a professional but tight smile. "Is there a problem here?" "Yes," the man said, gesturing toward Camille. "I think she might have taken someone else's seat. Maybe you should check her ticket?" The flight attendant turned to Camille, her smile thinning. "Ma'am, may I see your boarding pass?" Camille's jaw tightened, but she reached into her bag and handed over the ticket. The attendant's eyes flicked to the paper and then back to Camille, her expression briefly faltering. She said, "You're in the correct seat." "I told you," Camille said calmly, her voice carrying an edge. The man scowled. "Well, it's just unusual, isn't it?" he muttered, his words dripping with implication. The attendant's cheeks flushed. "If you need anything, ma'am, don't hesitate to ask," she said before retreating hastily. Camille tried to refocus on her book, but the man's muttering continued. Words like out of place and lucky break floated into her ears, each one a barb that pricked her carefully maintained composure. The indignities piled on throughout the flight. A different flight attendant bypassed her while offering champagne to other passengers. The man next to her accidentally bumped her arm every time he reached for his drink. Whispers buzzed behind her, and sideways glances landed like daggers. By the time dinner service began, Camille's patience was wearing thin. When her tray arrived, it was with a terse comment from the attendant. "You might want to be careful with the cutlery." Camille placed her napkin on the tray with deliberate precision and turned to the flight attendant. "Would you mind explain what you mean by that?" she asked, her voice calm but firm. The attendant's eyes widened. "I didn't mean," she stammered, but Camille had already shifted her focus. "Can I speak to your supervisor?" Camille asked, her tone very stern. The supervisor arrived moments later, her demeanor polished but her posture stiff. Camille calmly recounted the events of the flight, from the seating dispute to the pointed comments. As she spoke, the cabin seemed to quiet, nearby passengers leaning in to eavesdrop. "I'm sorry you feel that way," the supervisor said, her apology hollow. Perhaps there's been a misunderstanding. Camille tilted her head. A misunderstanding? Is that what you call blatant disrespect and microaggressions? Her voice carried a weight that seemed to freeze the supervisor in place. The man beside her scoffed. Oh, come on, you are overreacting. At that moment, a stewardess rushed to the cockpit, whispering urgently to the captain through the door. Minutes later, the door opened, and Captain Terence Jenkins emerged. His tall, commanding presence filled the cabin as he scanned the rows. As his eyes landed on Camille, his expression shifted from professional calm to personal concern. Is there a problem here? Terence asked, his voice firm yet composed. The passengers stilled as Terence approached the scene. Camille's lips curled into a tight smile. Not anymore, she said, tilting her head toward the flight crew and the man next to her. Apparently, I've been making everyone uncomfortable. Terence's jaw tightened. He glanced at the flight attendant, the supervisor, and finally the man beside Camille. My wife, he said, his voice cutting through the tension, is the United States Attorney General. She is not just entitled to be here, she has earned her place in every room she enters. Including this one. The cabin fell into an awkward silence. The man's face paled, his bravado crumbling. I didn't know, he mumbled. And that's the problem, Terence said sharply. Respect shouldn't be conditional on who someone is. The supervisor stepped forward, her voice shaking. Captain Jenkins, I assure you, this won't happen again. See that it doesn't, he replied. Turning to Camille, he extended his hand. Are you ready to enjoy the rest of your flight, sweetheart? Camille rose gracefully, smoothing her blazer. She looked at the man beside her and the flight crew, her gaze steady. I hope this serves as a lesson, she said, her tone calm but cutting. Bias has no place anywhere, not even 30,000 feet in the air. As she walked toward the front of the cabin with Terence, whispers erupted behind her. But Camille felt a renewed sense of strength. By the time they landed, the incident was already circulating on social media, and Camille knew this would be a conversation starter for days to come. The scandal would make headlines the next day, but for Camille, the victory was in the dignity she reclaimed and the precedent she set for others. In every step she took alongside her husband, she left no doubt about who she was, with or without his intervention. As Camille and Terence exited the airport, her phone buzzed with messages of support and requests for interviews. Terence glanced at her, a hint of pride in his eyes. You're always ready for a fight, aren't you? Camille smiled, slipping her hand into his. Not a fight, she said. A reckoning. The airline responded swiftly, releasing a statement apologizing to Camille and announcing mandatory sensitivity training for all crew members. While the gesture was appreciated, Camille knew words alone weren't enough. In the days following the flight, Camille spoke at a press conference, flanked by civil rights leaders and her husband, Captain Jenkins. This isn't just about one flight, she said. It's about the countless others who endure discrimination in silence. Today, we're starting a conversation, but tomorrow, we're demanding action. Her words struck a chord nationwide. Social media lit up with stories from others who had faced similar biases. The hashtag #FlyWithRespect began trending, igniting a movement that extended beyond air travel. Camille worked with advocacy groups to push for federal regulations requiring diversity and sensitivity training across all airlines. Meanwhile, Terence used his platform as a pilote to speak to industry leaders about fostering inclusive environments in the skies. 1 week after the incident, Camille received an invitation from the airline CEO to discuss long-term changes. She accepted, determined to turn this scandal into a stepping stone for progress. As she prepared for the meeting, Camille reflected on the journey. Discrimination, she realized, wasn't just an individual problem, it was systemic. But she also knew that systems could change, with persistence, courage, and the right people leading the way. Terence kissed her forehead as she grabbed her briefcase. "You ready?" he asked. Camille smiled, her confidence unshaken. The reckoning had begun, and Camille Jenkins was at its helm, proving that dignity and respect were non-negotiable, in the courtroom, in the skies, and everywhere in between.